First Bible reading is from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Hear the word of the Lord. The second reading is from John 14, verses 1 to 6. And I was saying to Matt this morning, I had an auntie pass away this week, and when I looked in the pew slip and this was the reading, it really helped comfort me. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Hear the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, friends. Peace be with you. Lovely to see you on this soft grey day. So, Psalm 46 is what we'll be looking at today. It's on page 455 of the Pew Bible. So I want you to have a think about this idea. You're going on a bushwalk. You've just set off for the day. You've got your hiking boots on, got a little backpack. It's nice weather, and you're walking along, and you're having a lovely time out in nature. And you're walking, and perhaps going a little bit longer than you expected to. And then you see some storm clouds rolling in. And the wind whips up, and you're getting a bit disorientated, but you keep walking, and then the temperature drops very dramatically. And it doesn't just start to rain or to sleet, it actually starts snowing. And now you're really stuck, because you're not dressed well enough, you're out in the middle of nowhere, your phone doesn't work, you haven't got any shelter or any food or any warmth. And you start to panic. You think, what am I going to do? And you keep walking because otherwise, if you stay where you are, you're going to get snowed in and no one will find you. So you keep walking, and in the distance you see a little structure and you think, I better go and find out what that is. And you keep walking and you get to this structure and you find it's a hut. It's a little hut that is put in that place specifically for people who might get lost on the trail. And you go inside and shut the door, and it's still howling and snowing outside, and there's a torch and you can turn the torch on. And there's some wood and you can light a fire. And there's a pail of water, you can get a drink and you can boil some water for a hot drink. And there are tins of food and you can heat up some stew and eat. And there's some blankets and you can get warm and you can sleep and you can wait out the storm. And you think, how fortunate am I to have found this refuge? Imagine how you would feel if that's you. All of that fear and anxiety and worry that's inside you, and you suddenly realise that you're actually safe. And all those chemicals are running around inside, making you feel a bit ill, but also a bit happy. And you are saved, you're in your refuge. Just hang on to that thought. But now have a think about this scenario. And it's one that everyone in this room will have experienced it. We're all getting older. We might have a spouse who's passed away, or perhaps a marriage that's broken up. Either way, we might be on our own. Our children have grown up, they've moved out of home. Maybe they've moved away from the faith that we brought them up in. Maybe they're busy in that stage of life where you're working hard and looking after children and all those sorts of things, not a lot of spare time. Maybe you haven't had family and children, and that's been your experience of life. Perhaps we're getting ill. Things are going on with our bodies or our minds or our hearts. Perhaps we're not feeling the connection to our faith that we've always had in our lives. Perhaps our income's not going as far as it used to. Perhaps there are other things that are going on in our lives. All of these emotional and social things happening in our lives, and we still feel those dreadful fear of what's going to happen. Have a feeling about that right now. And compare that to the refuge in the snowstorm. It's so easy for us to visualise getting physically lost and being physically saved in a space. And yet, in the day-to-day life that we always live, with all of these things happening, which are the day-to-day reality of our lives, where's our refuge? Where do we find that comfort? And if that's how you might be feeling now, and I've got to tell you, I personally am, read Psalm 46, because, my friends, that's where the answer is. This is where we find our refuge for those things. Think about that lovely hymn, the Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. That's what the psalm, the refuge, is all about. So if God is real, and we will believe that's true, how is it that we respond differently in those two scenarios? Martin Luther wrote a really famous hymn on this, betraying my previous Lutheran roots here, and in German is Ein feste Burg ist mein Gott, a mighty fortress is my God. And Martin Luther, of all people, knew what it was to have a refuge. I don't know if you know much about his history, but he was pulled before the Catholic Church. They demanded he recant his views, which were against some Catholic theology. He refused. They kicked him out of the church. They put a price on his head. Anybody who killed him was going to go directly to heaven because he was an enemy. And he was kidnapped along the road as he was leaving from being put on trial. He was kidnapped by some friends who took him up to a fortress up in the hills, and he lived there for a year under an assumed name and translated the New Testament into German. And in fact, modern German owes a huge legacy, a huge debt to the legacy of Martin Luther translating the Bible at that time. So he knew what it was to have a physical refuge, but also a spiritual and an emotional refuge. So if you have the chance to look up A Mighty Fortress is Our God, it's a wonderful, wonderful hymn. But so is Rock of Ages. These hymns were written on purpose to remind us where to find this refuge. So Psalm 46, it's a short psalm. And I think the key to it, we actually find at the very beginning and at the end. So they're the areas that we're going to focus on today. And it's because we are human beings, right? And we live in interesting times. There's financial stress, there are wars going on, there's a rise of nationalism in the face of mass migration. The corporate knowledge of what happened in the 1940s is still very much with us, so we know where this can go. There's inflation, there's artificial intelligence and all of the technology rising up that will change completely the way the world works with human beings, or human beings work with the world. Cost of living is a real hot button at the moment for good reason. And there's no particular order for any of these things that I said, because it's all overwhelming. There is so much stuff being thrown at us from every direction. As I said before, there's illness, there's bereavement, age, infirmity, our children's development, work security. We can go on and on and on. So how do we cope? Do we just grit our teeth? Do we white knuckle it? If anyone's familiar with that. I've white knuckled so many things in my life, it's a wonder I've got knuckles left. But I had a mother who raised me with the idea of putting your best front to London. Did anyone else have that? One of her favourites was put some backbone where the jelly is. We're raised very much with this idea of just be strong and get on with it, and don't let anyone see your sorrows. What was her other one? Was count your blessings in public and your sorrows in private. That was another one of my mother's, and I will bet that very many of us had the same sort of upbringing. But it's hard, and it takes a toll when we have to get through all of this stuff of life without a refuge, without somewhere safe to be. So, what is the key to living in these difficult times, in living with times of fear? Well, it's right here in Psalm 46. So let's have a look at the first couple of verses together. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. So what have we got there? We've got fortress, strength, help, takes our fears. So a fortress, of course, that's a high, safe place. I was talking about Martin Luther being spirited away into a big castle somewhere. Right? But a fortress is deliberately built up high in a vantage place with strong walls so that the enemy can't get in, or at least we see them coming and we can defend ourselves. So imagine how it feels to be there. And that is how it feels to be in God. And what is strength? Well, strength is not escaping from reality and avoiding problems. Fat chance of that happening in life. There are far too many of them, right? There's no escape from them. But strength is being able to face them day on day on day, even when we feel like we can't. And why? Where do we get that strength from? Well, it's because God helps us by taking away our fears. By coming to the Lord in distress, in need, in fear, in joy, in any other state at all in our human experience, we can hide in his depths, wrap him around us like a cloak, and borrow his strength to face the day. And we put aside our fear because we have him with us. Now, this putting aside is kind of an act of will, really, when you think about it. And it's a countercultural one, especially if you had that upbringing where you just had to have a stiff upper lip and soldier on, right? It goes against our kind of natural instincts, our fallen natural instincts. It takes practice to surrender to God. But in verses 1 and 2, God promises us protection and help when we do. So let's recap. We've got our fortress, that's our strong, safe place. We've got God's strength helping us to face our problems, because we will have them. That's just natural. He is our help because he takes away our fear. So when we retreat into God, when we have these fears, when we surrender, when we cleave, choose a word that works for you. We will all find a different way to relate to this. God's strength is what carries us through. If you're into science fiction movies, it's a bit like when the force field gets put around the ship and all of the enemies, what do you call that stuff? I don't know, when they're shooting laser thingies. Oh, I don't know, I'm not really into sci-fi. But you get the analogy, right? When you're being attacked and you've got the force field around you, that's what it's like to have the strength of God around us. That was a bit of a dumb analogy. I should have left that one out. Anyway. But why is this happening? Why is God even bothering with this? It's because our God is not a distant, disconnected God. He's not a disembodied God. He's not some spirit that's remote or some statue or idol that we have to placate, like you might experience in some understandings of religion. But for us, our God is real. He is tangible. He was a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night. He was a burning bush. He took human form in Jesus. He is always with us. He dwells within us in the Spirit. He is a personal God, the God of Jacob, as verse 7 of our psalm tells us. He is also the God of you and of me. He is our personal, real God. And he is deeply invested in us. So this is a two-way thing. God offers us refuge and invites us in. But it's one thing to know all this, and I dare say everyone sitting here knows all this. I'm not telling you anything new. But it's another thing to do it. So I think the key to knowing how to do it is to look at the last few verses, and we can read those together too. Verse 10, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Be still and know that I am God. Many people use those words as a spiritual practice called Lectio Divina. In fact, I've introduced it to the students at school. And the idea is that you sit quietly and you say the words to yourself, "Be still and know that I am God." And listen to it as though God is speaking directly to you. And then each time you say the phrase, take one word out. Be still and know. Be still and. Be still. Be. And then add a word back in. Be still. And go back through until be still and know that I am God. And when we do that, when we be still, we put these fears aside. We put all of the stuff aside. We create the space and enter into it and wait for God to join us there, our personal God who intervenes and comes into our lives. So this is a conscious act, and it's an act of getting out of our own heads and coming before God. The next point is, I will be exalted, says God. We embrace God as the highest power. It's not us. It's not the world. It's not family. It's not earthquakes or storms or politics or the economy or any of those other things that we have to white-knuckle our way through that terrify us and frighten us so much. We need to get that line of authority right and stay focused. God is exalted. And this God who is exalted, the greatest power of all, comes into our lives and gives us his strength to take our fears away. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. And the third thing is, I am with you. Remember that two-way personal God. He is our Father. That's why we call him that. He is the parent who protects and guides and chides, but also sacrifices himself for his children. So Psalm 46 tells us to remember these things in times of trouble so we will not feel afraid. God is our refuge. God is our strength. He helps us because he is deeply invested in us. He is the power above all powers, and he wants to save us. Indeed. Amen. Woohoo. I couldn't agree more. So can I encourage you, if you are feeling despondent, because we are all going to experience these kind of things. I've got, stuff going on in my own family at the moment with my children and work and insecurity and all that kind of stuff. It's awful. There's nothing happy about some of the things that we go through in life. Yeah? But when we remember that we have God as our refuge, if we can just go back to that image, the wooden hut in the snowstorm, the high fortress looking down over the enemy, the part of the rock that we can hide in, the big cloak to put around us, that can help us to get through each of these fearful things that we have to deal with. So in times of trouble, in times of fear or doubt, look up Psalm 46. Maybe practice Lectio Divina on Be Still and I Am God, and see if that will give you some comfort. Amen.